So what is mitosis? Will be our first question. And the second question is, why do cells do mitosis? So let's back up. And what is mitosis? What is mitosis? You read about it yesterday. Yes.
It's where cells divide and make an exact copy or clone.
Exactly. So cells divide and they make an exact copy or a clone. So why would cells need to go through mitosis? There are two major reasons why cells, your cells, anybody's cells, might go through mitosis. Okay, maybe three reasons. Why would cells go through mitosis? Yes. Excellent. To be a living thing, you need to reproduce. And if you are a single-celled living thing, the only way you can reproduce is by going through mitosis. And then also, we had the other answer over here, which was to grow. And then the third one is to replace dead and damaged cells. So, if you're a single-celled living thing, mitosis is the way you reproduce. To grow, because then you're making more cells than are dying. Cells just go through a normal life cycle where at some point, I mean, your cells don't live forever. So to replace dead and damaged cells, to grow, or to reproduce. So that's the reason cells go through mitosis. Now, who do you think is doing more mitosis in general? You guys or me? You guys. Why? Because you're younger and you're growing, right? So little babies, you guys, so when you're growing, and that's why you need more sleep, that's why you need more nutrition, because your cells, you need more nutrition, more supplies to make more cells, okay? So that is mitosis. The next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of go through the stages of mitosis, very similar to what was in the textbook that you read yesterday. So if you want to follow along, we're actually going to start on page 100, and then we're going to go back to that cell cycle picture on 98 and 99. So on page 100, people always ask, well, how long does it take or how long does a cell live? It depends on the type of a cell. And if you look in the textbook on page 100, they have this. And I don't know why they chose the human liver cell, but that's the one they chose to show here. And this shows what a cell goes through in its life. And a human liver cell, apparently its cycle, not its whole life, but how long it takes to go through mitosis, this is about 22 hours. So we could start right here, and then we're going to talk about each one of these parts. But this is, so that's the end of that cycle. Then this is kind of, this is interphase. Inter means between. Interscholastic sports between between schools, and phase is just the the phase. So it's going to go through growth. It's going to grow and develop for about 9 hours. It takes 10 hours to copy the DNA. That is crazy. It tells you how much DNA is and how important it is to copy it accurately. Then it prepares to divide, and then this little section right here is mitosis. And then cytokinesis. In the textbook, the first question was, what are the parts of the cell cycle? So the cell's life cycle, we have, so the cell cycle interphase, which is in between mitosis. And so basically what's happening here is just the cell does its normal functions. So if you're a liver cell, you're filtering things out and storing sugars and all sorts of stuff. And then you have mitosis, which we will talk about today, which has these specific phases, which we'll talk about in detail: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. Somebody said, do we need to know those names? On the quiz, you'll see these names, and you have to kind of tell what's going on. Or you have to match up the name with the description of what's going on. And we'll go over that today so it'll make sense. And I'll give you ways to remember it. And then the last part, it's always strange to me that this gets its own part, cytokinesis. Do you guys remember what cyto meant? Cytoplasm? Cyto means cell. Kinesis means to move. This is actually it's not really the cell moving, it's the cell splitting. That's the actual cytoplasm splitting into two cells. Okay? So up here, again, in all these yellow colors, from here all to here is interphase, all the in-between stuff. The blue is mitosis, and then the purple is cytokinesis. So of the 22-hour cycle, only 1 hour of that is actually cell division. Okay? Or the actual mitosis. Everybody good with that much? Excellent. Let's move on to talk about each one of our phases of mitosis. And as I mentioned, tomorrow and the next day, you're going to be making a mitosis poster describing each one of these phases, which is another way to practice it and hopefully make it easier. So if you have good notes here, that will definitely be helpful. So once again, interphase, right? Inter means between, and phase, right? It's just a stage. And here the cell is doing its normal job. It's growing. It's, if it's a muscle cell, it's moving. And this is cut and pasted just exactly from the textbook. Don't copy this down word for word, but maybe put it in words that make sense to you. Like the cell's doing its normal job. Near the end of interphase, the cell needs to copy the DNA. And again, next week we're going to talk a lot more detail about DNA. But what does the DNA do? What do the chromosomes do in general? You guys know what the chromosomes do? What does the nucleus do? It's got what? The nucleus controls the cell. And the chromosomes, which are made up of DNA, specifically have the directions for the cell. So let's just say DNA, which makes up chromosomes. And this is basically the blueprint or the directions, not just for the cell, but also for the whole living thing. And again, we're going to talk a lot about that next week, but if we're saying we're copying the DNA, I guess you should know what that means, right? So again, to remember, inter means between, phase. So interphase is the between phase, and you'll see what's going along here. In each one of these pictures, you have the nice cartoon picture, and then this, and it's harder to see on the smartboard here, but here you can see the cell. This is actually a real microscope picture of a cell. And so you can kind of see what's going on. You can kind of see the nucleus here. You can kind of see the centrioles and spindle fiber things here. And then they draw it here in cartoon detail with nice bright colors so you can see what's going on. Okay? Everybody good with interphase? Excellent. So now, this is technically mitosis now. And in your textbook, it's a little bit weird, but the way they are, the way they're numbering this, they said interphase is 1, and then mitosis is 2. So then you're going to have like 2 A, B, C, D. You don't have to worry about those numbers, but that's what those numbers are. So this is mitosis. So the first part of mitosis is prophase. So pro, of course, means beginning or before, right? Prophase. The beginning phase, the before phase. And so in this part, obviously, the cell has to get ready to copy. So in prophase, the DNA condenses into chromosomes. Before that, it was just long strings. Again, you look back and look how the nucleus changed. See here, the nucleus seems to be huge, and it's basically the DNA is all out and stringy in there. And then it condenses into these organized chromosomes. And you can imagine, like when you twist a string and then it twists, and then it coils on top of each other, on top of itself, and then it gets twistier and twistier until it's only, a fraction of the size it was before. That's kind of what the DNA is doing in a very organized fashion. So you can see it's actually made a copy of itself, and so each of these things like this are actually 2 chromosomes, one here and one here, one here and one here. Now both Tim and Moby and the textbook go into these other words. They have a centromere, which is in the center, and they say chromatids, which are the. Don't worry about those words. I will not quiz you over those words. Those words are a little too crazy. So mitosis, prophase, chromatin in the nucleus condenses. So you can just say DNA. You just write what I wrote over here. Makes more sense. DNA in the nucleus condenses to form chromosomes. The pairs of centrioles move to opposite side of the nucleus. So the other thing that's happening here that you need to know, look at this cell here, the real cell, and this is probably dyed so it's a little bit darker, but you can actually see the chromosomes now because they're all condensed together. And then the other thing happening up here, one of the questions in the textbook was about spindle fibers. And everybody's like, what are these silly spindle fiber things? Well, we're going to see them in a minute. Spindle fibers form a bridge between the ends of the cell. The nuclear envelope breaks down. So the nucleus, the nuclear membrane, is dissolving. So if you wanted to simplify it, the DNA condenses into chromosomes, the nuclear membrane dissolves, and spindle fibers form. That's the way I would simplify it for what's most important. Everybody got this? All good? Okay. So after prophase, we have metaphase. Meta means middle. Metaphase is the middle phase. And guess what's happening? Where are the chromosomes? They're not splitting yet, but they're in the middle of the cell. Metaphase, middle phase. This is the easiest one to remember, I think, because the chromosomes line up at the middle of the cell. And the spindle fibers attach to each chromosome. So see what's happening here. And this is cool. Check out this real picture. You see those little chromosomes? And again, it's hard to see in this picture. You can actually kind of see those spindle fibers attaching. And in the cartoon picture, of course. So you've got the centrioles. Again, you don't have to remember the name. But chromosomes lined up on the middle, and then spindle fibers attach to each one of each set of the pair of chromosomes to help them separate easily in a minute. That one, the actual description in the textbook, is actually just as simple as our description. Does everybody have metaphase? You need a minute? No. Do it at home. Alrighty, our next phase. Anaphase. Anaphase. So anaphase, one copy of each chromosome gets pulled to the opposite side of the cell. Okay? So anaphase, it doesn't actually say it, but it seems to me like the spindle fibers are pulling one of each copy. Anaphase. How are we going to remember anaphase? Something that pulls. Anaphase. I think, look at the letter A. Look, they're being pulled, and they look a little bit like an A. Got to have a way to remember, because you can have a picture to look at, remember? So anyways, you can see the chromosomes being pulled to each side. The cell is starting to stretch out a little bit. And again, don't worry about this level of detail. This has all those words you don't need to know. The centromeres split. The 2 chromatids separate. One chromatid is drawn by its spindle fiber to one end of the cell and the other to the other end of the cell. See? One chromosome, one copy of each chromosome is pulled to opposite ends of the cell. And again, in our beautiful real cell here, you can kind of see that happening. And again, for the questions in the textbook, the spindle fibers are what are pulling it. Spindle fibers pull. So I would say A is anaphase, and A is the shape of that chromosome being pulled. Upside down A. Right side up, A. Anaphase. All right, everybody happy with anaphase? It's awesome. We love anaphase. Don't worry, I didn't record that part. Okay, so anaphase. Then next we have telophase. Telo means distance. Telo like telescope, like telephone. Telo means distance. So in telophase, a new nucleus is forming at each end of the cell. So you can see, and a lot of times when I draw this, or you'll see it, there's kind of like a dotted line around to show that that nucleus is forming again. Okay? The spindle fibers have dissolved, and the cell is starting to pinch in a little bit here. Okay? And here's our beautiful real cell. Same thing happening. Says the same thing, basically. Chromosomes begin to stretch out. Oh, so now they're kind of unwinding again. But most importantly, a new nucleus forms around each set of chromosomes. And you don't have to remember nuclear envelope. You say a new nucleus is forming. Stretching apart, telophase. So we had 2 A, B, C, and D for 2 prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. It's like the cell membrane, only it's around the nucleus, right? So it's kind of like, it's almost like a cell inside of cell, which is actually one idea of how we got such complicated cells, is actually 2 cells living together. So the actual cell membrane is here, right? And it's something we went over pretty quickly when we went over parts of a cell, but the nucleus itself has another little membrane around it called the nuclear membrane, or the nuclear envelope. It really has too many names. Everybody good with telophase? Okay, so what should come next if we just finished telophase? What do we have to do? Yes, now we have to do cytokinesis. Cyto, like cytoplasm or cell. Kinesis is to move. And so in cytokinesis, the cell membrane pinches together to form identical daughter cells. So it's actually going to split. Each daughter cell then goes into its own interphase. Pardon me? I know, it's broken. And in plant cells, and Tim and Moby mentioned this yesterday, plant cells are a little different because they have the cell wall, so they can't like pinch and squeeze in half. So what they do in plant cells, here I'll draw a nice little plant cell cytokinesis. So in plant cells, most of the same stuff happened. You had kind of your new cell membranes in here, right? Because they have a cell membrane inside. And they each had their new little nucleus, chromosomes. And then to finish making a cell, it makes a new, to make the new cell wall, it doesn't pinch together, it builds a wall. And in the middle, it's called a cell plate. I don't care if you know that. But in plant cells, the cell plate forms between the 2 new cells as a new cell wall is built. So can't pinch, builds a wall. And the textbook says the cell membrane pinches in around the middle of the cell. The cell splits in 2. Each daughter cell ends up with an identical set of chromosomes and about half of the organelles. So that's important too. So the cytokinesis, all those other organelles, remember we have the ribosomes and the endoplasmic reticulum and the lysosomes and all those crazy things. You're wondering kind of what happened to all of those. As the cell grows, it can make more of those. And as it's split, it roughly divides it in half so that each cell has what it needs. Okay, so what's going to happen after cytokinesis? Just told you right there. It does it again. So what's the next part it's going to go into? Interphase. So each cell then goes into interphase. And in the textbook, it shows it as a nice circle because it's a cycle. It keeps repeating. It doesn't spend equal amount of time in each phase, but that is our cell cycle. Are you guys done with cytokinesis? Can we see what the next picture is? All right, and our next picture is this again. So, and this again, the numbering, the textbook had 1 was interphase, 2, A, B, C, D was the actual mitosis, and then cytokinesis. And oftentimes I kind of use mitosis and cell division and cell cycle kind of interchangeably. But technically, the cell cycle is its whole life, and technically, mitosis is just kind of the copying and splitting, or copying of the nucleus. Okay? But not a big deal. We already talked about that. And then, and this is just something you can do, and this is kind of like what we're going to do tomorrow. But you can come and put these in the correct order. Isn't that exciting? We'll come back to that in a minute, and then you can play with those. Well, let's take a look at this, though. Which one of these should go first? The one that's only one. That looks like a fried egg. Okay, good. Now which one's going to come next? The one with the X's in it? Okay. So, what phase is this one here? Interphase. And then what's this phase? The other one's better. Okay, what's this called? This is prophase. What's happening here? What's happening here? The nucleus dissolved. The spindle fibers are forming. What phase is this? Oh, look, is that the right one? Oh, that's not the right one. No, that is the right one. That's metaphase. The chromosomes lined up on the middle, right? Then which picture goes next? This one. Watch this. Okay. What phase is this? What phase is this? Anaphase. And then telophase. New nucleuses are forming, cells pinching together. And then what happens between here and here? Cytokinesis. And then they both go to interphase. Okay? So this is something else you can do if you make yourself some little cards or whatever. But that's kind of what our posters will look like tomorrow. Oh, that's going to be kind of what we're going to do tomorrow, so no worries about that. Excellent. All right. Any questions? Okay.